The topic of lecture, anatomical and physiological features of the tooth pulp and etiology, pathogenesis, classification of pulpitis. And as for endodontics, it's dental specialty concerned with the study and treatment of the dental pulp. It deals with structure and function of the endodont and methods and techniques of manipulations in the tooth cavity. Anatomy of tooth pulp. Tooth pulp is a loose connective tissue which fills the pulp chamber and root canal. Chamber of pulp and root canal. The dental pulp is a part of the dentin pulp complex or endodontium. Pulp consists of several elements. There are cells, different cells, intercellular substance, and fibers. And also pulp contains vessels, blood vessels, and nerves. It's a significant part of the pulp, and there are insignificant number. Macroscopically, the pulp has cherry red color due to a large number of blood vessels, and the pulp forms protrusions or horn of the pulp which correspond to the number and location of the hillocks of the occlusal surface. Anatomy of root canal. It has usually three parts: coronal part, middle part, and apical part. And as for anatomy of pulp chamber, it has chamber or coronal pulp located in the crown of the tooth, and root canal or radicular pulp is the portion of the pulp located in the root area. And pulp finishes in the apical foramen. Apical foramen is the opening from the pulp at the apex of the tooth to be continuous with periapical tissue around the tooth, around the root. And there is also accessory canals or lateral canal. There is extra canal located on the lateral portion of the root. Apex anatomy. It's also very important due to root canal treatment. There is anatomical apex, the tip of the root determined morphologically. It's just a tip of tooth. And also we have radiographic apex. It's the tip of root determined radiographically in X-ray picture. Apical. Next point is apical foramen. It's the region, not the point, region where the canal leaves the root surface next to periodontal ligament. And the most important part where we stop during root canal treatment, it is called apical constriction or physiological constriction. It's minor diameter, it has minor diameter. The apical portion of the root canal having the narrowest diameter, very narrow, physiological or apical constriction. And there is apex anatomy, also several parts. Apex, anatomical apex, and it may determine in X-ray picture in the same point and corresponds to radiographic apex. And apical constriction, the narrowest part of the root canal. There are some differences between chamber and root pulp. Chamber pulp is a loose, contains gentle fibers and connective tissue cells. And opposite root pulp, more dense, contains a lot of collagen fibers. As for blood vessels, chamber pulp is rich in blood vessels and nerves. And as for root pulp, it is poorly vascularized and innervated. And odontoblasts in pulp chamber is situated in several rows, about 2, 3 or 5, 4 or maybe 5 rows. And it has pear shape. In root pulp, odontoblasts is situated in 1 or 2 rows, and they have cubic shape. With age, the fibers become larger and the pulp becomes more dense. Depending on the location of the cells, the pulp is divided into 3 layers. Peripheral or odontoblastic. It consists of the bodies of odontoblasts. Next, intermediate or subodontoblastic or Wales layer. This is layer which is cell poor, not a lot of cells in it, and central layer which is rich with different cells, blood vessels and other elements, collagen fibers, intermediate. Pulpa-dentin junction. Its connection between dentin and pulp, and it has several elements which is connect between bodies of odontoblasts and cells and blood vessels between different tissue, dentin and pulp. Odontoblast is the main cell in peripheral layer of the pulp, is highly differentiated and most specialized cell in the pulp, and whose biological function is dentinogenesis, which is the formation of dentin. Odontoblasts produce dentin. It is its main function, plastic function, producing of dentin. There is body and processes of odontoblasts. Apart from odontoblasts, there are a lot of other different cells of central, mainly central layer of the pulp. And there are fibroblasts, histiocytes, plasma cells, mast cells, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophilic granulocytes, and other different cells of immune system, and also fibroblasts. Fibroblasts produce collagen and other, for example, histiocytes produce some biological active substance. Lymphocytes has immune role. Blood supply. The blood supply of the pulp is due to main artery, which is penetrate into the apical opening where it branches, forming a pulp capillary plexus in the cavity of the tooth under the layer of odontoblasts. And the outflow occurs through the plexus of venous vessels, and two veins leave the apical opening, one artery and two veins. Blood supply is carried out in a closed cavity, not open, closed, and the pulp has a constant volume. Therefore, when changing blood pressure or inflammation, the regulatory system is necessary. The stability of intrapulpal pressure is created by collaterals, arteriovenous anastomosis, shunts in the periodontium, and pulp inside. The drain of blood through them explains the frequency of attacks of pain in pulpitis. The richness of the pulp with blood vessels approximately corresponds to brain tissue. In well supplied with blood areas of the pulp with inflammation, self-healing can occur due to good blood supply. Lymph flow prevents the accumulation of microorganisms in the pulp and promotes the release of toxins through the apical opening of the tooth. Innervation of the pulp is due to branches of trigeminal nerve, about 20% of the pulp volume. All efferent impulses from the pulp, like temperature change, mechanical deformation, tissue damage, cause a feeling of pain. The main feeling is feeling of pain due to different irritants. The main is the main plexus in the tooth is Rashkov plexus, and it is in subodontoblastic layer. Location of nerve ending in horns maximum. It's about half of the whole volume, 49%. In the central part, 36%. In the field of bifurcation, 7%. And in the root canal, 8%. The main part of nerve ending is in the horn. It's the most painful part of the pulp, horn. There are two types of nerve fiber that mediate the sensation of pain. First, C fibers without myelin, most common 72%. They are involved in a dull aching pain, and they are thinner and unmyelinated. They are thin, low speed, sensitive and sympathetic innervation, and they responsible for the aching pain, long-term dual pain, and opposite A fibers with myelin. And their volume is about 30%, 28, conduct rapid and sharp pain sensation and belong to the myelined group. A gamma fibers and A beta fibers a little bit different. First one, they are thin, relatively low speed or carrying out, responsible for sensitive innervation and responsible for sharp or tearing pain, and A beta fibers, thick, high speed, sensitive innervation, but responsible for tactile, not painful sensation. Functions of the pulp. There are three main functions. First one is plastic or dentin forming function. It is physiological formation of primary and secondary dentin. Next point, pathological formation of tertiary protective dentin, when caries or abrasion, formation of denture, and formation of tooth root. Second function is nutritive or trophic. It is determined by a well-developed circulatory and lymphatic system. And also, due to when depulpation, there is reducing the amount of water in the hard tissue, teeth, and teeth become fragile and break down without pulp. So pulp is responsible for trophic. And the third function is protective or barrier. Due to different points, like powerful blood supply, cell elements of immune system like macrophages, neutrophilic granulocytes, plasmacytes, and other like fibroblasts. And also due to mechanical barriers like Killiker-Fleischmann's film of hyaluronic acid in dentin tubulus which absorbs foreign bodies like bacteria and their toxins. During development of the pulp, there are three periods. First, embryonic, from the formation of the dental papilla to the eruption of the tooth. Second, functional, high level of regenerative and protective function of the pulp up to 30 or 40 years. And senile, it means reducing the volume of the cavity and narrowing canals. Pulp atrophy, reducing the number of cells and blood vessels and increasing the volume of connective tissue. There are age-related changes in the pulp. Sclerosis of coronal as well as canal pulp, canal chamber, and atrophy of pulp. And there are some pathological changes in the pulp and pulp chamber. For example, taurodontism or pulpitis. It's increasing the volume of pulp chamber, different stages. It's normal tooth and different stages of taurodontism. The pulp chamber is getting more and more in the volume. Another type of pathological changes is internal resorption. There is internal resorption in X-ray picture. This is root canal, and in the central part of root we can see resorption of root walls and formation some spaces around shape due to activity of osteoclasts. And other pathological changes in the pulp is petrification. Petrification or formation of stones inside the pulp, maybe in coronal pulp, in orifice, and also in root canal due to formation of tertiary or irregular dentin. Inside root canal there is some dense substance and it is called petrificate or dentin stone. Pathological changes in pulp is possible due to, for example, caries, decreasing of the volume, reducing of pulp. When periodontitis, also in root canal there is some process like sclerosis, calcification, or due to injury of the tooth. Also some changes. This is normal teeth with root canal. We can see root canal in X-ray, and this is tooth after injury. There is absence of root canal, no root canal in X-ray due to different process like sclerosis. Next part, pulp space. It is called endodontium or pulp space. This is the main object of endodontics, relatively stable, slowly changing in its form and volume. Etiology and pathogenesis of pulpitis. Pulpitis or inflammation of pulp may be due to two main reasons. Due to infection reason, and it is called infectious pulpitis after bacteria activity or their toxins. And the second group of factors are non-infectional factors and pulpitis non-infectious pulpitis or traumatic. There are three groups of trauma: temperature injury, mechanical trauma, and chemical injury. So two groups of pulpitis: infection because of bacteria and non-infection because of different trauma. The course of the inflammatory reaction in the pulp depends on different factors. Depends on etiology, when microorganism activity more often purulent process and non-infectional cause, cirrhosis process. Next, the presence of a hole or communication between caries cavity and the cavity of the tooth. Open cavity of the tooth cause chronic proliferative inflammation, and closed cavity mostly acute or purulent process. And also age may affect. In young there are exudative and proliferative course of pulpitis, and in elderly most often necrotic processes. The most common causes of pulpitis are bacteria, microbes, and their toxins. There is no specific pathogen for pulpitis. In various forms of pulpitis often found association hemolyticus and non-hemolyticus, streptococcus, lactobacillus, and staphylococcus. Different bacteria, streptococcus, lactobacilli, and staphylococcus. Hemolytic of streptococcus secrete, like hyaluronidase, due to depolymerization and liquor base material of the pulp. As a result, bacteria penetrate deep into tissue, and another their substance like streptolysine dissolves cells proteins. Amines are formed, the main food for bacteria, as well as biological active substance having pain activity, such histamine, serotonin, prostaglandin, etc. Biological active substance. Pathogenesis of infectional pulpitis. Bacteria, mostly streptococcus, and their toxins cause necrotic disorders of the vascular walls. As a result, its permeability increases, migration of cells and blood albumins begins, and proliferation of pulp cells at the body with the damaged area. There are four main ways of infectional penetration into the pulp. First, the most often, through the caries cavity. The second is through periodontal pocket when periodontitis. Next, contact way in the focus of osteomyelitis, and the most rare is hematogenous, for example in sepsis, but it's not very often, it's a rare way. Dentin tubes has diameter about 3 micrometers, are the main pathway of microorganism. They have smaller diameter into the pulp. The protection of which sclerosed and substitutive dentin is non-ideal. Without treatment, the tooth caries enters the pulpitis. Caries and then pulpitis, penetration of bacteria through the dentin tubes and their pathological activity due to different substances and toxins. The penetration of infection from periodontal pocket to apical, the whole tooth, and typical arising acute pulpitis, and maybe chronic pulpitis, and cause pulpalgia after, for example, curettage in periodontitis. After some treatment procedure of periodontitis, it may be infectious first inside pocket and due to apical hole inside root canal, and after that pulpitis through periodontal pockets. Its mechanism. As for traumatic factors, for example, acute injury cause accidental opening of the pulp, or maybe fracture of tooth crown, Alice 3, and tooth injury. Due to this reason, acute injury occurs. And chronic injury, it may be due to cracked of the tooth, traumatic occlusion when overload of a solitary tooth, and pathological abrasion also cause chronic injury of pulp and after the occurrence of pulpitis. Tooth injury, cracked tooth, or maybe chronic trauma like overload. Iatrogenic pulpitis. Iatrogenic means due to doctor's activity. First cause is thermal burn of the pulp during, for example, preparation. When constant preparation without water cold, it may be overheating of pulp, coagulation of pulp proteins, and non-compliance with the penetration mode, preparation mode, and also amalgam seal without laying, without isolation pads. Next reason, incomplete removal of the pulp or residual pulpitis. Opening of the pulp when preparation, during treatment, during preparation and dissection of necrotic dentin in caries, or when setting the pins. It also may cause opening of the pulp. Iatrogenic pulpitis. It may be residual pulpitis due to incomplete opening of the pulp chamber and leaving pulp in one of the root when treatment pulpitis. The fourth reason is chemical burn of the pulp. It means, for example, no laying when acrylic plastic, cement, some cements, and it may be asymptomatic pulpitis or necrosis of pulp. Also zinc phosphate cement without therapeutic pads at the depth caries, and zinc phosphate cement when fixing crown, for example. It may cause acute pulpitis or violation when procedure of etching technique when filling with light composites. Next reason, pulpitis under filling. It may be due to incomplete necrectomy in the treatment of caries. Not all necrotic dentin is removed, and so bacteria remain in the tissue and penetrate through the dentin tubulus into the pulp. Classification of pulpitis. There is International Classification of Diseases, ICD, International Classification of Diseases, number 10. All diseases of pulp and periapical tissue have code K04, the common code for these diseases, this group of diseases, pulp and periapical tissue. K04.0, the group of pulpitis, and inside this group there are 6 codes, 6 different codes. First code K04.00, it's initial pulpitis. We studied this disease during previous module of cariesology, and it is the same like deep caries, initial pulpitis or hyperemia. It doesn't require endodontic treatment. It doesn't require root canal therapy because it's just caries, initial pulpitis or hyperemia. And starting with the next disease, K04.01, acute pulpitis, it's a real pulpitis which requires endodontic treatment, root canal therapy. K04.01 acute, K04.02 purulent pulpitis or pulpal abscess, K04.03 it's chronic pulpitis, 0.04 chronic ulcerous pulpitis, and the last one in this group, K04.05 chronic hyperplastic pulpitis or polyp of the pulp. These 3 diseases, 3 code K04.1, 0.2 and 0.3 are not very popular and so not very significant in this module. And there is another classification. It is clinical classification of pulpitis. It has 3 main forms: acute, chronic, and exacerbation. Acute is divided in 2 forms: local or focal and diffuse, and chronic has 3 different clinical forms: fibrous, gangrenous, and hypertrophic. Classification of pulpitis according to clinic. 2 types of classification: ICD, International Classification of Disease, and clinical classification of pulpitis. The lecture is over. Thank you for attention.